Hey, folks, welcome to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. So glad you're here. I am really excited about the episode today. In Ethan's absence, I have invited someone that I just adore, and her name is Hana Butler.
This sounds like a stupid question.
Probably is, because, go ahead. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for.
When you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth.
In the first microseconds, your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and what we call social danger.
I'm pissed off at you.
Me specifically?
Well, just because you're my boss and all.
Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Go forward and don't suck. Hi, Hana.
Hi, Mike.
Hana Butler joined our team of consultants. I'm terrible with this kind of stuff, Hana. When did you join this team of consultants?
Well, this is my third year now. So it's like 2 years ago, really.
Okay. Yeah. So I've known Hana for a while. She is one of the two consultants on our team that actually live in my small town called Leavenworth. If you're a listener from far away, we are in Leavenworth, Washington, right in the middle of the state up in the Cascade Mountains. And just through sort of community involvement, Hana directed the farmers market. She was also on staff at the Ripple Institute. Actually, Hana, are you still kind of connected with the Ripple Institute?
With the Ripple Foundation.
Ripple Foundation.
Yeah, I helped co-found it and was involved for many, many years, actually over 8 years. And then after I had my first son, I kind of have stepped back a little bit, but I've been still working with the women of the Ripple Foundation doing some monthly women's circles. Although with COVID, everything, obviously that kind of has changed. So I'm definitely not as involved anymore. But they're still doing some really great programming.
It was a really great experience for me. I did a couple events with them, but the one I did with you, the adventure thing, what was it called?
Yeah, so it was all about the hero's journey.
Yes.
So it was called The Hero Within, and it was a weekend-long retreat where we had a bunch of folks join us at a location, actually in Plain, close to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't very far for you to travel. And it was very experiential based around Joseph Campbell's hero's journey template and getting and walking that in our life and using that as a template for understanding our journey of our own lives and how to relate those experiences to that template. And we really dug deep in a lot of things. Yes.
Yeah, it was great. It was
not a shallow thing. Yeah.
No. There was, I think, maybe 12 or 15 of us, and we had some really intense sharing and just some really crazy, like I was crawling through pipes blindfolded, and I got to throw a mug against a brick wall with all my fears on it. And came home all covered with paint, and my wife just thought, what in the heck? But it was really great. And what's really cool about it, Han, is that's where I first saw you really in action. And I was so impressed with your grace and your, on one side, kind of your gentle kindness. On the other side, you were just strong and competent and easy to follow. And I remember right then just sort of tucking that into the back of my brain that, this would be somebody I wouldn't mind working with someday. And then, 3 years ago, how did you find out that we were looking for a consultant?
Yeah, the funny story of, life searching moments, right? Yeah, so in 2016, I had my first son, and I had been working in outdoor education and leading wilderness trips, expeditions of all styles, and also doing experiential programs here for the county. And I was just getting burned out, and I was kind of tired of working with other people's kids, which I know you can relate to. And I love teenagers, but I was also just tired of them. And so used that as a hiatus to kind of quit that career path and was searching. I really was like, what am I going to be doing? What am I doing next? And I love my children, but being a stay-at-home mom was not totally fulfilling for me. And Mike Nash posted this thing on Facebook, out of all places, saying, hey, I'm looking for a female to join my team of consultants. And my poor husband, who has ridden my waves of passion and interest for the last 10 years, where I sign on to these things because they fit my need in the moment and they sound really exciting. I said, this is it. I feel so good about this. I messaged you. It was probably actually in the middle of the night because I was up with my kid. And I remember I messaged you immediately, like, oh my gosh, I want this. And I didn't even really know what it was, but I knew you, and I had seen you also facilitating recently in some local movements here around just kind of community organization and development. And so, yeah, I messaged you right away. And I think you actually had quite a bit of responses from that weird Facebook post. But next thing I knew is we were having coffee. I was with you and Christy, actually, in a little cafe here. It was kind of a little pseudo interview. And then
Yep.
I started doing a lot of shadowing you and driving over the mountains and watching all the trainings. And we're kind of vetting each other, checking it out. Was this really what I wanted? And yeah, and the day I knew I really wanted it was the day I also got extremely sick, but was trying to be tough. And I ended up in the middle of the training as I'm watching you. And I know this is the day where you're going to tell me whether I've like made the cut or not. I'm observing, I start to get the sweats and I'm like, oh God, what's happening? I don't know, food poisoning. And I end up having to leave the room and go throw up in the bathroom and this training. But I come back in because I'm like, oh man, I got to be tough. Mike is going to let me know whether I've gotten this job with him or not. And we end up going out to lunch, and I'm really actually about ready to pass out while we're having lunch. And my face was probably green, but I was trying to stick it out just so I could hear whether you're going to take me as a consultant or not. So,
oh, I remember that. I remember you pretending to eat, like you couldn't even eat.
I couldn't.
Finally, we finished. We all, we talked about all the good stuff, and you were in, and then you finally told me how freaking sick you actually were. So, it's been really fun watching you grow and develop, and you've brought so much knowledge and so much skill, and our clients are thrilled with you, Hana. So I love that you're here, and I love that we can talk. And it's funny, there's this other reason I realized this morning why I'm actually so excited about, this podcast. And it's because we're both promoters. So we have, there's not very many promoters on our team, and listeners, you may remember behavior styles, right? Analyzer, promoter, listener, conductor. I'm a promoter conductor. Hana, I'm a conductor promoter, I think, but Hana, you are a promoter conductor.
Promoter conductor.
Yeah, we are the same person, and it's fun because it's just this break. Here's what's funny that would drive Ethan crazy. Hana, how much practice or rehearsal or preparation have we done for this?
Oh, yeah, I've thought about it a lot.
I've thought about it too, right in the shower. Yep. We have no script. We have no questions. We have no prep. We are just going to talk and interrupt each other and talk over each other and laugh and have fun because that's what we do, and we don't prepare. So, Ethan, this may be a mess. I hope it's not, but we're gonna do our promoter thing.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, hey, we're gonna talk a bit today about group dynamics. And Hana comes with some special expertise in that area. I was thinking about this, and this is going to sound like I prepared, and I actually didn't. But in my master's program, we, talked a lot about group dynamics. And Kurt Lewin was the guy that we talked about a lot. And he's an old dead white guy. He did most of his work in the early 1900s, and I don't remember the dates or anything, but I do remember this. Kurt Lewin literally coined the phrase group dynamics. Like that wasn't even a thing. and he coined the phrase group dynamics, and he is actually the guy that created the process that we use called action research, which is a whole nother story. But the other thing that Kurt Lewin gave us was the concept, which was brand new at that point, which he's the one who created the phrase, the sum is greater than its parts. He's the one who said, you can't really understand a group by talking to each individual person, right? Because the sum is something different than the sum of the parts. And so a group takes on its own life. It takes on its own characteristics, right? And that's separate from the individual human beings in that group. So he actually came up with that systems way of thinking. And so we studied him and then went on to, other theorists. But I love group dynamics. We are experimenting with group dynamics in our own group of consultants. We certainly help with clients with this all the time. So Hana, tell our listeners what gives you some special knowledge about this. Like, why do you know so much about group dynamics?
Yeah, I love that background from that guy.
Kurt Lewin.
Kurt Lewin. Yeah. So what I find fascinating, my background is actually more in what we call outdoor education or experiential education. I was very fortunate to be raised by parents who in the 70s, actually, you guys actually have very similar backgrounds. My dad worked at a juvenile delinquent facility, started an outdoor program for those kids who were they were in lockup, but him and these other folks, including my mom, who was actually an intern there, realized that the power of the group itself, right, that sum, these kids were labeled as troubled, and actually some of them really were troubled and had caused major issues in society. But when you take them outside into this novel setting, away from the patterns of behavior, away from that kind of holding environment that was how they were raised in relationship to certain authorities, you'd actually start to see behavioral change happen at a much quicker rate than you would in a normal classroom or in some kind of therapeutic thing.
Right.
So my dad saw the beauty of that, and also, of course, enjoyed it, taking these kids out to Mount Rainier, taking them out on the river. And so growing up, my sister and I received full benefit of that. And then later my stepsisters joined as well. And so expeditions were part of our annual experience as kids, whether it was out on the river in the spring in the freezing cold, or
river rafting.
Yep. And we would do 2-week-long sea kayaking expeditions up in Vancouver Island in the middle of nowhere on these remote islands, pretty much all over Vancouver Island, from the very northern tip to all the way along the west coast. So extremely remote. And somehow my parents and their friends took 6 children out there with sea kayaks, and we did have a motorboat. But again, just removing ourselves from everything that we know of this novel set and into this novel setting where a different kind of learning can really start to occur. And it's also related to Bruce Tuckman was the guy who coined the phases of development in the 1960s. So we saw this science of group dynamics start to emerge, and this understanding of, there's stuff going on here. And then now, every group has this necessary and inevitable thing they're going to go through. And it's going to relate and reflect on the facilitator or the parent or the trainer, whoever is leading. And it's necessary for a group to progress into a place where they can actually perform. So they start at forming, then storming, norming, then performing. So forming, where we all are pretty good at being polite. And when I was leading expeditions, I always joked that they always started on Mondays, and then by Wednesday, people were starting to flip into a different phase called storming, where we start to realize we're different, and people get tired or they get uncomfortable, and they start challenging authority in different ways. And then some groups get stuck there, or they may never move past it. The group may dissipate. But if the group is held in the right way and can work through it, they'll get to norming, where we start to create those shared norms, shared vision. We start to realign in our roles. And then eventually the goal being we want our groups to get to that performing stage. And I actually add one called transforming, because this is actually cyclical. Once a group reaches performing, it doesn't just stop. We have to keep going throughout time. So we want them to actually get to that place of performing where things just become second nature, and it's very intuitive, and what we would refer to as high morale, where you're getting the things you can't pay or punish for from your people. It's their best selves, they're innovative, creative, and things, they're not necessarily easy, but they're coming with a lot more of that good stuff.
And at that point, the sum is definitely greater than the parts.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love the transforming piece you've added on. You should have your own theory in Wikipedia or something, the Hana Butler.
Yeah. I don't think I didn't coin that one. Somebody
Okay.
else
All
did,
right.
but
But forming, storming, norming, performing is Tuckman's model. And it's really interesting that the way you describe that, because the way you explain that, that's just what happens, right? Of course, like you said, groups can get stuck in a stage and maybe never move on and maybe break up. But I kind of lied when I said I did zero research. I really did quickly look at some of the other theorists, and I found that those phases, all the theorists mention those phases. They don't use the same words, but every one of them has these phases. And right in the middle of these phases is this conflictual piece, right? This difficult stage. And I know with the working with the organizations that we work with, 25 years now of watching groups form and go through phases. And it's pretty, unfortunately, not uncommon to see a group hit that storming phase and then quit. And it's not working. We failed, and not work through that and not ever get to norming and performing. And I guess one of my questions for you is, what does storming look like, both out in the experiential world, but also in the boardroom or in the conference room? What does storming look like?
That's a great question. And yeah, we just even working this topic yesterday with a group of folks around it's that law of thermodynamics, right, that we talk about. Within a system, if there's not energy being introduced, it will continue to kind of go into this crazy place of disorder and chaos. And it's the same thing we tell our clients, right? That if a culture is not intentionally engineered, it's going to go bad.
Right.
And it's the same in our personal relationships. And it's again, that kind of looking at the different things. When I was out in the woods with folks, storming it's physical, it's tangible. It is that people are literally losing their stuff, like whether either actually they've lost their stuff, like they can't keep track of it, or people are
you mean
fighting.
Like, okay, so sort of losing their shit too, like they're
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of like
I didn't know if I could say that on this, but
no, don't ever swear on my podcast, please.
Pretty much, losing the shit. So it would show up in a lot of these kind of ways, because we were usually a group of 10 folks, and we are eating, sleeping, and doing, everything together all the time. And so people get pushed to this place pretty quickly where they can't maintain this level of politeness that we've been taught in society. And so that would show up as, fighting, literally, like whether it's yelling or just not wanting to follow the other person or agreeing with them. It would stop us in our tracks. We're not going to be able to go up we can't do a peak climb if we're not actually working together as a team.
Right.
Again, that sum is part of the parts. And if we're all connected on a rope team, I can't have one of my people wanting to go the other way.
Right. Right.
Same thing on a raft. If I had everybody going into this crazy entropy state or wanting to not listen to the guide, and everybody's paddling in different ways, we're not going to be able to get through this rapid together, or we're going to end up going sideways and we're going to flip over. So it was everything from the subtle, nuancy things of interpersonal dynamics, not getting along. And the underlying piece of this is trust, right? It always comes back to a level of trust and respect, and how that manifests in behaviors.
That's great. And that whole thing you've just described, of course, follows the stage that we called forming, where I think you used the word polite, right? People are polite. And what I'm noticing in groups is that there's almost this assumption of trust. We kind of come in with sort of a kind of gifting each other this trust because, we haven't had problems yet. And I don't know who I'm not supposed to like yet. And we all have some hope. It's all going to be great. And so there's this sort of polite lending of trust to one another during the forming stage, right? Then we hit this storming stage. Let's talk a little bit about what that storming stage might look like, for a group of adults in a work group, right? Your thoughts on that?
Well, I see it in, again, it's subtle, but not subtle. It's the vibe. You feel it when you come into a place, whether it's that resonance of trust and respect that manifests in a feeling of safety. Am I safe to show up as my authentic self? And It's also obviously shows up in conflict, but we also see that action of triangulation, that behavior where I'm going to be polite to you on the front, but then I'm going to go talk about you behind your back to other people, or I'm going to sabotage that decision that you made
or that we made this decision together, but I wasn't really on board. So I sat there and just sulked in the meeting.
Yeah.
I went out and sabotaged it later by talking bad about it.
Right. So there's those are some of the behaviors that probably are a little more pronounced, but I have to admit that from what I've seen, even from within our team, it's these real subtle vibey things that I think get deemed kind of woo-woo, but what I'm noticing now more than ever is that this emergence of understanding the importance of digging into group dynamics is really important for organizations, no matter what, from nonprofits to major corporations. That if we don't address this kind of interpersonal stuff that's going on in the moment in our meetings, when someone feels shut down or someone isn't speaking up as much, or maybe they're just not performing the way they were in those first few weeks they were hired. Those are all kind of these signs and symptoms of storming. And if our leaders aren't aware of that and they don't know how to coach or help facilitate a group through that, we watch that erode trust and respect, and therefore productivity and morale extremely quickly.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And let's take a little bit more time on that. You get the subtle, you get the triangulation, you get the vibe. I notice it in, and this kind of fits with what you're saying. I notice it in just sort of this defense mechanism thing that comes up in groups. The shutting down, you got interrupted twice, so you just stopped talking. People mainly feeling like their ideas were not heard. I was watching a group do consensus a couple of weeks ago, and there was one person in particular who both times she suggested something toward the consensus, it just sat there like a rock. Like nobody said a word about the thing she just said. That happened to her twice. And then I watched her kind of pull back and not really participate. And so I think it takes a leader with some situational awareness and some emotional IQ to be able to see these things and start to notice that, not everybody is gelling like they were before, and we're starting to see some defense mechanisms and some reactions and some shutdown. And so storming can be somewhat subtle like that. It doesn't, when I'm seeing adult groups in the boardroom kind of thing, it rarely devolves into, shouting and, really ugly, messy stuff. It's just much more subtle. But what you don't get, and I love the way you said that, if we get stuck there, if we don't address it, if we don't work through to the next stage, you end up losing all the magic that can happen when a group really does start performing. You lose the creativity and the collaboration and the authenticity and the personal growth that comes from that.
Yes. Now, and here's where this gets tricky, is that this is really fresh in my mind because I was sharing with you earlier, is that actually a student of mine from 12 years ago who was on a 50-day expedition that I was
50, 50,
yes. And I was what was called the proctor of that. And I'll explain that in a minute, but she's actually staying at my house right now. And so it's brought up a lot of these memories. And I was 26 years old, and my job was what was called the proctor. And again, my specific job was not necessarily to be the techie expert, but my job was to be the relationship manager of these 10 human beings who age ranged from 20 to actually in their 50s. Over 50 days, I was supposed to, at 26, be able to manage and encourage and support the relational development of this group over time in these really extreme settings. How cool is it that within the structure of the way we were doing that, we recognized, and this was when I was working for Outward Bound, there was a recognition that technical skills and keeping people physically safe is only a very small part of the success of a group like this. When we actually are really trying to physically, emotionally get them to do what we call peak experience, so that means actually climbing a peak, like we summited Mount Hood, or it could also be more of a emotional thing where we're getting them to that place of performing and they're able to navigate by themselves, they're cooking by themselves. And these were adults, but of course we do this with teenagers as well. So there was this recognition that we actually needed someone to hold this relational sphere. And I was very excited to take this because I love this stuff. And at the same time, I have never been so exhausted on all levels of my being than in the middle of this course, when I was getting worked because I was struggling to hold, how do I actually manage all these emotions and these group dynamics going on within my team, and learning a lot about boundaries and other things like that, in order to help be successful. But again, this recognition that in organizations, our managers and leaders are being asked to know a lot of technical skills about how to manage or how to perform those quote unquote duties, or achieve that productivity goal of a technical skill. And yet there's this whole other realm that's around, how do you actually help people be their best selves? How do you help manage that emotional intelligence piece, and help a group progress through these dynamics? And it's asking managers a lot. And so that's one of the reasons why I love our trainings, is because we're bringing in that piece. We're recognizing how important it is, and we're helping give these practical tools that are going to help move these groups through these phases in a healthy way. Because like I said, it's inevitable. A group is going to do this.
Right.
No matter if you're okay with it or not. And the more aware and part of the process a leader can be, the quicker you're going to get groups to that performing phase, and in a much healthier way. You're not going to do damage along the way. And the hardest part here is adults are way harder than teenagers on this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because adults, we are really good at holding on to our masks, meaning
Yes.
Those polite pieces that we have, the armor basically that we have worked so hard to create in order to feel safe within the world. And on that 50-day course, Mike, it took until I was just rereading the journal. I mean, it took until day 45 for this group to finally bust through that kind of final phase of norming and get into performing.
Wow. That's amazing.
Because again, the sum is there. If one person is creating a little bit of that toxic dynamic, or not willing to go into that next phase, the whole group cannot go. And there was one person, and it took her until that day to finally crack open and then move forward. So some groups go through fast, other groups they're gonna hang on, and it all is going to reflect about the different parts, like the people, a part of your team, and how do you steward them as a group, but then also how do you coach your people as individuals?
That's really good. This is great. You know what this is reminding me of is I don't know if this is a good time to pivot, but our whole common commitments process we do with groups. I want to talk a little bit about that, because so we've talked a little bit about forming and storming. And by the way, I right now I'm working with 2 groups, and most of the time when we get called in to help a group, they're calling us because they're experiencing some storming. I think I would say probably 80% of the time we come in and work with a group, a board, a management group that's not just doing management training, but trying to work on, how they show up. It's usually about that. It's storming, but every so often we get the privilege of working with a group that's just forming. And I have a group like that right now, and it's so fun because we were able to talk through these stages and kind of prepare them and equip them for what to do as they get to those stages. And so it's been really fun to have a chance to do that proactive work.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to talk a little bit about going from storming to norming, I think. And I think there's a lot of ways to get there, but I love the common commitments work that we do and that we've trained managers to do. And in a nutshell, I just want to explain, it's this process by which we ask group members in small groups, we pair them up or put them in smaller groups of 3 or 4, and we ask them to kind of brainstorm this hypothetical, perfect, functioning, excellent, healthy group. Brainstorm all the behaviors that you're going to see happening in that group and all the behaviors you are not going to see happening in that group. And so these small groups come up with these big lists of behaviors, and they come back together and we make this big list of these, again, hypothetical, fantastic, perfect group out there that doesn't exist. What are the behaviors that they're that are showing up and what behaviors are not showing up. And we have to make sure they really get to behaviors, because what they'll do, of course, is they'll say things like respect, which is great as a headline, but nobody walks into a conference room and sees the word respect on the wall and says, oh, okay, therefore I won't interrupt today. Like people, the word respect doesn't mean anything. It's not an actual behavior. Professional or unprofessional, those aren't behaviors. And so, we coach the group to really come up with these behaviors, and then we pick some. And we specifically try to pick the ones that they might be struggling with. And we know that based on maybe some surveys or some interviews. And we work on those. We work on how to give feedback, how to receive feedback, not defensively, right?
Yeah.
What else? What else might we work on?
Well, just decision-making styles too,
right.
Giving people tools on how to make decisions in a way that empower all the group members, whether they're processors or expedients.
Absolutely. Yeah. How to do consensus work, how to support decisions afterwards. We talk a lot about authenticity and showing up. We talk about recovery in the sense of when there has been a breach or a break in trust. What do we do about that? So we work on these things, and then we ask the group after whatever period of time it might be. We might do this for 3 or 4 days over a period of a couple months. We might do this through a series of half days. But and actually we've done it in one day, many times. But then we asked the group to make some commitments. And I just had this experience with the group last Thursday, and it was really cool, or last Wednesday, because they as a group, they chose from this list. And I think they chose 9 things is what I'm remembering, but they made commitments to one another. These are the behaviors we're going to be shooting for. These are the behaviors we're going to be avoiding. And I had them actually, each of them verbally make that commitment to each other. And then we wrote those up. And, it's not magic. It's not, that doesn't solve everything, but it's a really intentional way to get a group to be mindful about storming into norming. So I love that process, and I've seen it work really well.
Yeah. And that's where you and I have talked around. When I was doing this out on expeditions, it was a very foundational piece of every trip and every course I've ever led, whether it was the 50-day course or just doing a ropes course, challenge course day here in Leavenworth. Every group, we would make common commitments, or we called them commitment to excellence or full value contract, a team agreement. I mean, whatever it was, there was always it was a very intentional conversation around how are we going to show up today with each other? What are the behaviors that we want to see? And then what are the things that we're going to really work hard on holding each other accountable if they do show up? And also then working on not having those be a part of our group contract. And when a group creates that kind of contract or the commitment to each other, it's verbal. And of course, for us in experiential ed, we would create posters, and we actually would have flags with us. On that 50-day course, we had a flag I made out of canvas, and it went with us everywhere. And you can imagine what it looked like after 50 days.
What was the flag representing? The commitments?
The commitments are written down on it, and then we had everybody's handprint on it. And
that's cool.
Yeah. That was one thing about when I, doing experiential education, and I see these correlations between organizational development and management skills. Obviously they're different in different contexts, but there's so many similarities, and they're all about how do you create that feeling of trust and respect, and not just a feeling, but the behaviors that go along with it.
Yeah.
So that
and
we can be successful. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's what promoters do. The word intentional comes to mind as you describe that. As I talk about the common commitments, right? It's the idea that we all recognize that groups have their own personality, their own life, right? Again, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's not just a bunch of individual people, although they're the main ingredients, but it's the magic that happens when they get together and begin performing. And if you're not thinking about that group dynamic as a separate thing to be attended to, you're gonna miss it. And I think that's where you're going to maybe get stuck in storming, or end up just maybe barely getting to norming, but never getting to performing. I just think there has to be, my message to managers is if you manage a team And, hopefully you're meeting together on a regular basis, and our podcast here, we've talked about meetings and agendas and how to make decisions together, or, we've had lots of topics that relate to group work. It's really important for me that managers think about the life of their group and their group dynamics as a separate entity, and something that's part of their job as managers to nurture and grow and attend to, right? So again, it's about this intentional, what did you say at the beginning? The engineering culture, right? The intentional engineering of culture. And so group dynamics is something that we've got to be focused on as managers if we want to get all the magic that comes from a group that's performing.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, it's not just, yes, the magic is awesome. And here's the benefit for you as a manager.
Yeah.
If you intentionally utilize some of the skills that we talk about directly in our trainings, and I'll add like one-on-one meetings with your people, and really having this awareness of what's going on within your group and that subtle interpersonal level, it's going to actually help you save energy later, right? So it's just like raising children. I have 2 small children right now, so I'm reminding myself of this all the time. Little kids take a lot of effort, right? And that group formation process is going to take a lot of energy from you as a manager to help set clear expectations, make sure everybody's got their right roles. In the outdoors, we would have actual charts that tell what's your job today. And you're spending a lot of time teaching those people how to do those jobs, so they're meeting the expectations. And again, out there, it's tangible. It's like how to cook on a cook stove, and how to make dinner, and then how to pack your pack, and how to pack, these kind of things. But then if you put in all that energy up front, and you create this feeling of trust and respect and behaviors that show trust and respect, that create psychological safety within your group, when your group then progresses through storming and gets to norming and performing, you're not having to do as much, right? You should be you should be in the background. And for us as instructors, that meant my people are leading, they're navigating, they're making the decisions, they're holding teammates accountable on their own behaviors. I'm not having to quote unquote discipline, do these kinds of things. So it's actually, for you as a manager, if this sounds like a lot of work and you're like, oh geez, now I have to have this whole other thing. I just wanted to put it in there that yes, it does take work, effort, and intention and energy at the beginning, but then at the end, or if you can get your team into that really high functioning place, you're going to be able to step back and then just help guide the ship, right?
Oh, I love it. That's a really good way, I think, to kind of end in talking about, you're describing the benefits of a performing team, which is not dissimilar to the benefits of a performing individual, right? When you have an individual with high morale, isn't it a lot more fun to manage that person, a lot easier to manage, because you're not having to spend all the time doing maintenance and correction and, troubleshooting. Instead, you're getting creativity, and you're getting innovation, and you're getting commitment, and you're getting energy. And same thing with the group.
The group and that sum and the parts. So if the group is you're going to help shepherd and steward the group through this, but again, the individual will also be there too, right? So they're not separate.
Right.
And if the group is at a performing phase, that also means that the group is allowing the individuals to show up as their best selves in the most authentic way. And it means the things that they're great at, but it also means that there's space for the places they fall, but that falling is okay, or failing is okay, or their shortcomings, and we accept it. And we're actually going to help coach you. And it's the group coaching, not just you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's exciting. I love this topic because when you get a group that's performing, it actually brings this whole level of morale and energy and commitment and buy-in that you can't, like you said earlier, you can't buy it, you can't pay for it, you can't punish for it. It comes because it comes organically. It is work, as you said, it's work to help a group get there. I think it's worthwhile, and I also think it's really energizing to do that kind of work. Any last thoughts on this, Hana? This has been great.
Man, there's so many stories are running through my head about these things of all the little examples, but it just really comes down to being a manager, having this in your awareness, and then having the things in your toolkit that will help you navigate how to build this in your team, or how to help them process it. And one last thing though is that the group will never progress into that territory that you haven't gone yourself as a manager or leader or as a guide or instructor, right? I'm not going to be able to I can't guide somebody down a class 4 rapid or I can't expect my people to go down a class 4 rapid unless I can do that myself. And not only should I be able to do it, but I should actually be able to do that fairly comfortably, because I have to have this threshold of like, how far do I push these folks? And if I'm not willing to go there myself, they are definitely not going to go there. You're going to get a lot of crazy tension and storming if you ask your people to do something that you haven't done within yourself first.
Wow.
And so and I don't mean this again in like these kumbaya, touchy feely things. It's practical stuff too around performance measures and evaluation and meeting those expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So just know that your people and the group on a very subconscious way are very aware of what's there and how far have you gone yourself. And so that's why it's so important for managers and leaders to do this kind of training, especially like things that we offer around how to build emotional intelligence within yourself, how to be aware of these subtle group dynamics, and how to intentionally engineer your culture so that you can get your people to that peak experience, whatever that might be, over and over and over again. And it never stops, right? Just like parenting never ends. You're going to get to one peak and then you're going to start all over again. Mm-hmm. But your people never lose that trust. They never lose that skills that you've built already. So the next time it's just going to be up a level.
You're building upon their successes. Yes.
Yes.
Wow. Hey, folks, you can all understand now why we are so excited to have Hana on our team. Hana, you are brilliant and you are articulate and you are fun. And I just, that little shameless plug you did there, I just want to kind of emphasize it. We got folks, we can help you with this stuff. www.nashconsulting.com. If you haven't, check us out. We've got lots of offerings specifically. And Hana, I believe, will be part of this. We are going to be doing a public offering. We don't do these very often, but this spring, and we don't have the dates quite yet, but they are coming. We're going to be doing our 5-day Managing with Mind and Heart, and we're going to be doing it on a Zoom platform. So it is available to everybody who wants to show up. And we have a wonderful notebook that goes with it. And it's basically our signature 5-day workshop in which we delve into decision-making and morale and the power differential and triangulation and running great meetings and personal adaptive skill and emotional IQ development. Lots of the stuff we've been talking about here today. Well, thanks for being with us, folks. And until next time, pay attention to those group dynamics and go for the peak. Go for the peak experience. Anything else, Hana, before we go?
No, thanks for having me, Mike.
It's been fun. Thanks.